Good morning. And if you're sixth period, then good afternoon. We're going to continue with the work that we've been doing with fractions. And last week we did adding fractions with unlike denominators and adding mixed numbers with unlike denominators. This week we're looking at subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. And we did a little bit of it yesterday. So to get started, we're going to review what we're learning, why we're learning it, and how we will know we have learned it. Well, just like we've been doing, we're going to continue to use the least common multiple and the greatest common factor to make equivalent fractions. And having made an equivalent fractions, we're then going to be able to use the operation that's indicated. Last week we did adding. This week we're going to work on subtracting. And remember, you're subtracting your numerators. You do not subtract the denominators. Why are we learning this? Well, being able to make equivalent fractions and then either add or subtract is an important life skill. You're going to be using fractions throughout your life, and they're not always going to have the same denominator. This is also going to strengthen your math skills and allow you to be able to reach deeper levels of understanding with fractions. How will you know you've learned it? Well, the first way you'll know you've learned it is you will be able to find the least common multiple and the greatest common factor and make equivalent fractions. You'll have no problem doing that. You'll be able to set them up, and then you will check to see what operation sign you're using. And if it's a subtraction, then you're going to subtract your numerators. You can also look at the success criteria on the board to make sure that you're doing it correctly. So let's go to a quick review. Yesterday, we took a look at making equivalent fractions, and I have 5/8 and I'm going to subtract 1/4. As you can see here, my common denominator is going to be 8. If I look at my 4 table and I think of the multiples of 4, 4, 8, 12, 16. I look at my 8 table and I think of the multiples of 8, 8, 16, 24, 32. Well, the first number they both share is 8. So now I'm going to find my greatest common factor. 4 times 2 is 8. 1 times 2 is 2. 8 times 1 is 8. 5 times 1 is 5. Remember, we said if your factor does not change, or if your denominator does not change, your fraction is going to stay the same. So 5/8 does not change. Now, I'm going to subtract my numerators. 5 subtract 2 is going to leave me 3/8. And I look at 3/8. I cannot reduce 3/8 anymore. It's already in simplified form. So I am done when it comes to the fraction that I'm going to be using. So that's the review. And again, I'm going to take a look at my first step was to find my least common multiple. My next step is to find the factor that I'm going to use to make my new equivalent fraction. Kind of hard to write with a mouse pad. And then I'm going to subtract. So those are all the steps that I used for this. And you're going to be working on a subtraction of fractions worksheet. Mr. Thomas is going to hand out the worksheets to you now, and you're going to turn to the side that has the first 8 problems just like this. Okay, turn to that side now as soon as you get your paper, and then we're ready to begin. I'm going to work through the first 4 with you, and then I'm going to have you work together to complete the rest of them. So I'm looking at 8 and 2. And the first step is I need to find my least common multiple. Well, I'm going to think of my 2 table and I'm going to think of my 8 table. And the first multiple they both share is 8. So I'm going to write my new denominator. And I'm going to think 2 times what number is 8? Well, that's 2 times 4. So there's my factor, or the other way we refer to it is the big 1. 4/4 equals 1. So by using 4/4, I'm not changing the value of the number, I'm just making an equivalent fraction. And then 1 times 4 is 4. So 4/8 is an equivalent fraction for 1/2. 8 times what number is 8? Well, that's 1. And again, we said if your denominator does not change, your numerator does not change. My operation sign is subtraction, so I'm going to subtract. 6 subtract 4 is going to leave me 2/8. Some of you may look at this and say, oh, I can reduce 2/8 using 2. If I divide by 2, 2 goes into 2 one time, 2 goes into 8 4 times. So 2/8 is the difference. In lowest terms, it's 1/4. Now I'm taking a look at the second example, and I have 2/3 subtract 2/9. Well, I have a 3 and a 9. So I'm going to think of my 3 table, I'm going to think of my 9 table, and I want the first multiple that they both share, and that would be 9. So I'm going to write my new denominator, leave room so I can show my new numerator, and 9 times what number is 9? Well, that's 1. So this fraction did not change. It stays 2/9. 3 times what number is 9? Well, that's 3. 2 times 3 is 6. And again, my operation is subtraction. So I'm going to subtract 6, subtract 2, and I have 4/9. Remember, you're doing this along with me. You are not watching me do it. You are writing this on your paper as we do this together. So now the third one, 11/2 subtract 5/6. Well, the same thing. I need to find my least common multiple. So I'm going to think of my 6 table, and I'm going to think of my 12 table. 6, 12, 18. 12, 24, 36. The first multiple they both share is 12. The other way you can think of it is there is a 12 in the 6 table. 6 times 2 is 12. 12 times 1 is 12. And that would be your least common multiple. Now I need to find my factor. 6 times 2 is 12. So that means 5 times 2 is 10. 10/12 is an equivalent fraction for 5/6. Well, I'm noticing my denominator did not change, so I know I'm going to use a factor of 1. And my equivalent fraction is the same, 11/12. The operation I'm using is subtraction. 11 subtract 10 gives me an answer of 1/12. Good. Now I'm looking at 4 and 10. And I'm thinking of my 4 table, and I'm thinking of my 10 table. And if I count by 4s, 4, 8, 10, 4, 8, 12, 10 can't go into any of those, so I'm going to keep going. 16, 20. Oh, 10 can go into 20. 4 can go into 20. So 20 is my least common multiple. Ten times what number is 20? Well, that's 2. 1 times 2 is 2. 10 times what number is 20? Well, that's 5. So there's my factor. 3 times 5 is 15. I'm subtracting. 15 subtract 2 is 13. And I have 13 twentieths. And can I reduce 13 twentieths? Well, no. There's no number that goes into 13 and 20 evenly, so I'm in lowest terms. So let's take a look at this one. I have 15 and 20. So I need to think of my 15 table and my 20 table, and I need to find the first multiple common to both. So if I count by 15s, I have 15, 30, and 20 won't go into 15, 20 won't go into 30, 45, 20 definitely won't go into 45, 60. Oh. I count by 20s, 20, 40, 60 is your least common multiple. So 60 is my least common multiple for 15 and 20. Twenty times what number is 60? Well, 20, 40, 60. That would be 3. 16 times 3 is going to be 48. 15 times what number is 60? Well, that would be 4. 13 times 4 is 52. And again, I'm subtracting. So 52 subtract 48 is going to be 4 60ths. Well, 4 60ths. Can I reduce 4 60ths? I know I can use 2. What about if I use 4? 4 goes into 4 one time. 4 goes into 60. Well, 4 goes into 6 one time and 2 left over. 4 goes into 25 times, so I have 1/15 in lowest terms. Okay, we're going to do 6 together, and then I'm going to have you continue with 7, 8, and the rest of the examples on the first side of the paper. If you have time to continue, then you will also do the other side of the paper. You are going to turn these papers in at the end of the period, and if they are not turned in, you have no credit for the work for the day. Make sure your name is at the top. No name, no credit. So let's take a look at 6. And I have 5/7, subtract 1/2. Well, I'm going to think of my 7 table and my 2 table. And the first multiple they both share is 14. Now, when we first started doing this, I had you draw the factor box. Now, I'm just putting my fraction bar to show where the factor is going to go. If you want to draw the box, by all means, you may do that. If you want to just put the fraction bar and write your factor there, that's fine. You can do that too. So I'm going to think 2 times what number is 14? Well, 2 times 7 is 14. 1 times 7 is 7. 7/14 is an equivalent fraction for 1/2. 7 times what number is 14? Well, that would be 2. And then 5 times 2 is 10. Again, I am subtracting. 10 subtract 7 is going to give me 3/14. Okay? Now, you're going to take it from here for the rest of the examples on the first side of the page. And then if you have those finished, turn it over and continue working on the other side. Your homework tonight will be the problem of the week and no other homework. So you may work together as long as you are working on the math. If all you're doing is talking and making noise, you will have to work alone. The only talking that Mr. Thomas should hear is math talk. You may use your multiplication chart if you have it to help you. You may use your notebook for examples. Those are all tools available to you. You may talk to the person next to you about what you're doing. That is also a resource. Social conversation is wasting time, so do not do that. Okay? So you can pause the video here. This way you can refer back to these examples. And for the rest of the period, you're working on the examples on your paper. If you need more room to work this out, do it on a separate sheet of paper. But you should have enough room to show your work on the worksheet that you've been given. Okay? Good luck, and I will see you tomorrow.